So what was it that made you get into fashion?
I feel like I started off in a different route. I started off doing art, especially at A level. I only did art as a creative. On the rest of it was all like sciences. So then from that, I moved on to doing an art foundation, where I sort of started to discover fashion more, and I was more interested in it at that point. I think because I was surrounded with other people who were interested in fashion, or like we were a group who all found it as something like important to us. So then I started looking more into it, and then finding that putting my creativity towards fashion was more enjoyable than just towards the art side.
So how important is fashion to you when it comes to sort of expressing yourself, using your creativity and stuff like that?
I think fashion's really important, especially when it comes to expressing yourself. I think it shows people around you who you are, as well as being able to be like significant pointer to others of like how well you'll get on, or like if you're similar people in that way. I think that's a really important thing to do with expressing yourself through fashion. I think fashion as a whole is important to society anyway. I think a lot of the time we might not notice, but like it shows professionalism, or it shows creativity. It can show like very different things for different reasons. So I think there is definitely importance in fashion in everyday life.
What would you say to someone, let's just say someone in this room doesn't know anything about fashion, what would you say the most common sort of misconception of fashion is? Is there anything which you think people who sort of looking at it quite ignorant, in sort of an ignorant way, don't understand?
Yeah, I think a common misconception of fashion would be that people just assume it's like surface level, that there's no depth behind it and there's no thinking for every single reason. For example, like someone who wouldn't know anything about fashion wouldn't know about the depths that go into trend forecasting, and how every colour worn is because of politics at the time, or what like is fashionable due to what TikTok is famous at the minute. Like every tiny thing is taken into account before it gets put onto a design. So it's more than just, oh, that colour looks nice. And I think someone who wouldn't know much about fashion would think that.
Do you think fashion is almost like an art as much as it's sort of a sort of practical thing? Because obviously everyone needs clothes, but do you think there is like an artistic side to designing, and sort of when you make an outfit, even though it's for someone else, it's sort of you're expressing yourself through that?
I think definitely there's a high element of art within the fashion industry, and I think at every level there's been a creative direction behind it, even if it is workwear that's been designed for work, like holding a hammer, for example. Like it's got a purpose, but also behind that there's been creative choices which led to the final product. So I think every, like even at a level where it's just for purpose, it's still got creativity behind it. And I think then the higher up you go, when it gets into like haute couture, it's a lot more like obviously creative and a clear form of art. But I think at every level there is still that to it.
Okay. So obviously you're sort of a guy doing fashion. I think most people's perception of fashion design is female, personally. Do you think, what's it like? Do you feel slightly outnumbered? Do you feel like it has any impact in your decisions or anything?
I think definitely as a guy doing fashion at university, I'm outnumbered in that sense, and I think that's like noticeable, but not a bad thing really. I think no one, like within other students, we're all doing the same work, and if you saw a piece of work like without knowing who made it, you wouldn't be able to tell if it was a guy or a girl who designed it, I think. But also then when you get higher up into the actual fashion industry, I think there's still a misbalance in gender, like towards males. I think there's more males higher up in fashion and in the business side particularly. So I think even though at the surface level it seems like it's a female-dominated industry, I think there's still an imbalance in gender equality in different areas. So I think it doesn't really affect me personally as a man in fashion. I think if anything, it's probably helped me out in ways because people think that way, because people think, oh, this is must be different being a man in fashion, when actually I think there is a lot of opportunity out there still.
You sort of mentioned fashion sort of can be to do the politics of the time and stuff. If you had to make sort of a powerful outfit, or how would you do that? How do you express, I don't know, either emotion or meaning, or do that through sort of fabrics and colours and stuff?
I feel like all of the creative process comes down to how you can express a feeling or emotion through a garment. So I think starting off, you begin with your concept being the certain emotion or the political view or reason for making it. And then from that, you'd take ideas, take shapes from this by doing more exploration, by doing primary research, by collecting words that have meaning towards that theme, and then taking elements of that out, I think, is a key thing. So you look for how you could use a shape to, how you could use a word to create a shape, or how a certain colour makes someone feel, and then exploring that, then using these ideas and putting them into a final garment, rather than going straight from an idea to a final garment. It's all about the creative process, definitely, and getting small ideas from little parts of it that eventually becomes a final idea when you bring it all together.
On that sort of creative process, from sort of concept to essentially when you make it and it's on the catwalk or whatever, what's your favourite bit? Do you like the practical side of sewing, finding the materials? Do you like the sketching? Do you just like sitting down and thinking, well, that would be throwing stuff together? What's your personal favourite part of the process?
My personal favourite part of the creative process would probably be a mixture of the very beginning and the very end. It's that middle bit which I don't like as much, but I'd say, so the initial concept development, the ideas, coming up with a concept that has depth and a bit of grip to it, something more than just flowers, for example. That's what I like getting into that quite deeply. And then I really love the actual making as well. So I love sewing, and I find working out how to make something from a drawing. I find that really interesting as well.
Yeah, I imagine each sort of garment's sort of a long project. You can't just make one afternoon. Do you sometimes you spoke about the middle bit, when you get to that sort of middle part, is it sometimes hard to sort of keep the faith in your idea, maybe if you just can't make it practically work? Because I think that's the thing with fashion other than other art, people got to wear, this has got, if you're making a coat, it's got to keep you warm, no matter what it looks like. So are there times where it is difficult to sort of pursue your original aim, and is making changes and accepting that it's perhaps not exactly how you imagined it difficult?
I think definitely it's important. That middle section can be difficult to keep yourself motivated, but I think it's important to understand that at the start you shouldn't have a final idea. And I think if you go into a project with a final design in mind, then it's not going to be anything new or anything that creative. So I think it's a learning process, definitely, that I have learned over being a student, that you can't go in with a finalized idea and expect that to be your final outcome, and that middle section of being told, no, you need to change this, or this isn't going to work practically, or this isn't showing your concept well enough, that's the section where you actually find the most creativity through making mistakes and changing. So I think that part of the process, although it can be a bit draining, is actually really important for developing, rather than just having a final idea from the start.
Yeah. Obviously you're a student, so you're still essentially learning the trade. Have you had any sort of real disasters? Have you ever had something where just everything's gone wrong? Any sort of story, any project where you just you sort of showed your lack of experience, lack of skill?
I feel like it's been a weird one, because we've been in COVID so much since I started this course, that we haven't had that much practical, physical in-person sewing. So I think whenever it's coming down to the actual sewing parts of the degree now, it's showing, and I think a lot of us don't actually know how to make a lot of things. So we'll be like in the studio and everyone will be asking technicians for a hand, like waiting around the whole day until we're able to get like told how to do this thing, which should have taken 5 minutes. So I think definitely that practical element of the course has been lacking, but I think over the past few months, there's definitely been a huge development of that through like being able to be in and being able to be constantly trying things out, fixing things, working it out by ourselves, as well as then tutors being able to tell us. So I think that would be the most like disaster, as it were, would be the actual making sense of it. Because since the start of the course, we've only made 2 full garments.
Okay. So you've made 2 full garments. So of the sort of projects you've done and of the 2, so what's your favourite thing you've done so far? Is there anything that you're really looking forward to learning how to do? And then what are you working on at the moment? And yeah, maybe what's the end goal? What would you like to do full time?
Okay, right, so I feel like things I've really enjoyed doing would be, I feel like the first project we did, which was our first making project, was enjoyable because it was an interesting brief. We were designing for homeless people and using like recycling material. But I think because of that being the brief, it was limiting in the sense that it was all recycled material, so it was more difficult to use. We couldn't use fresh fabric that was like readily made, like to be sewn. So I think that was that made that a bit difficult, and so the final outcome wasn't like quite as polished as I'd want it to be. And then our last project we've just finished was a project for All Saints. So again, that was limiting because that's high street. It's not, you can't have that much creative freedom. It was menswear only as well. So we were limited to that. So I think in both of those projects, the making's been enjoyable because I've learned how to do something new. And like, I think from looking from the first one to the second one, my sewing skill has got so much better and is a lot more professional now. But I think that's made me even more excited for the next project because we're just about to start. We've just been briefed this week on it, and it's a complete freedom. We get to choose the concept, choose what we make, choose how many garments we make, if it's an accessory, if it's a jacket, if it's a dress, we can choose whatever, and completely go from the start to the finish, going how out there or how like minimal we want it to be. So I'm really excited for that because I feel like now I've got the understanding of the practical side to be able to put that into a more creative channel in a way that will be like more exciting for me along the process, give me more creative freedom, as well as them being able to have an outcome which is actually polished. So I'm excited for that. And yeah, I guess I'll just see how that goes in the next couple of weeks, really. And then future goals. Currently, I'm very unsure. I feel like I'm going to want a break from fashion when I finish the degree. So I think I'm going to definitely, like, I'm enjoying the degree, but I know final year is going to be a lot more than this year. And I feel like it's going to wear me out to a point where I'll want to take a year or 2 out, do something more like fun, maybe just traveling and working in between, to then finally either come back to fashion or go into another creative field. So I think that's where I am currently, trying to decide whether to pursue fashion and the whole fashion industry as it is, or try and use that creativity that I've learned through this course for something different.
The sort of fashion industry, I don't know how much you know about it, I know nothing. So, but like, are there any sort of, what are the sort of big challenges facing? Are there any sort of like, I don't know, ethical debates in there? What's sort of the state of the fashion industry as far as you understand it?
So yeah, I'd say definitely the fashion industry in its current state isn't something that I'd really want to be contributing towards because of it's so awful to the environment, it's completely unsustainable, and although it's only just now becoming more of a thing for sustainability to be involved in fashion, it's still so overridden by the fact that there's so much waste throughout the whole process of making garments, and it's just getting to a point where it's so detrimental to the environment and clothes are just being thrown away before they're even being sold, that it just does seem almost bad to try and then add to that. But I guess like through our course we're taught constantly to think about sustainability and how we can work in the future sustainably. So I guess in that way, hopefully us as future designers will be able to make more of a change than the current state of the fashion industry is. But I think it's one of those that I'm definitely going to have to take a step back and decide if it's ethical to actually carry on in the way that it is currently.
So you're also doing a lot of the sustainability stuff. Do you think that, obviously with this, I think this our sort of generation is quite socially conscious, and particularly with like global warming and stuff, do you think you might see a wave of new designers who are pushing a more sustainable future, who are trying to sort of change the direction as much as they can?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that in the coming years, new designers will be pushing a new wave of sustainability, and I think across all boards it's something that we are taught and we are more aware of as a generation. So I think hopefully with us now leaving uni and going into the working environment, that we'll be the ones making a key change. But also then again, it is difficult because where we'll be starting in the industry is below all of these people who are already working in a negative way towards the environment. So will that then just rub off on us by the time that we get to the point where we'd be able to make change? Is a difficult one to know.
So it seems quite difficult to be balancing like your sort of passion and your skill with your ethics essentially. Do you think a lot of design from people, other students you've spoken to, is this something which is talked about a lot then, sort of what you sort of love doing against what you want to support?
Yeah, I think definitely within other young designers, it's a constant conversation, and I feel like it's something that everyone is constantly trying to overcome in different ways. And with it being like our course's passion, for example, that like fashion is what we want to be going into, we are taught that sustainability is so important. So therefore I think we're trying to find different ways by like downsizing or starting like small businesses, slow making, things like that, which I think is a much more sustainable model. But then looking into the future, once we finish uni, the likelihood of the amount of people graduating from fashion this year, for example, can't all just go into slow making their own businesses. Like that's not going to be possible to sustain that many people. So I think it is definitely a conversation being had about sustainability that is here or there. I think a lot of people will talk about it now and then go into the industry and not be able to make any difference and almost give up. So I think it's definitely swinging people like about what to go into, especially if you're not 100% sure that you want to do fashion. For example, I'm not 100% sure that fashion is what I want to be doing forever, whereas there are people who would like definitely do. So I think they'll put their sustainable and their ethics aside more because that's their final aim.